What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick, and I am back with yet another album review. Once again, John's car still being worked on, so kind of giving him time to work on that. And there are still more albums that I really want to go over, and this one popped up on my radar. And once I realized all the different people that were in this, or at least the bands that this band was associated with, it was really hard for me to pass on this one. That and it also comes out on one of my favorite labels. So today we're going to go over the debut full-length from Corpus Offal with their album Corpus Offal. That also features the song Corpus Offal. Anyway, this also comes out on the 21st of March on 20 Buck Spin Records. This band formed somewhere around 2024, maybe a little bit before. And considering all the bands that are associated with this band, it was kind of surprising to find out that Austin, Texas was listed as the place where this band formed. Anyway, this is their debut full length. Now, this band put out a demo last year, and I remembered a lot of people like really talking about this one. And one of the big reasons they were talking about this demo, not only because it was really good, it was also announced almost immediately after Cerebral Rot called it quits. Now I was definitely bummed because Execration Mortality became like one of my favorite albums by them. But at the same time, there really wasn't much of a mourning period because people were already hyping up this band. And as well they should. This is filthy, grimy, putrid, old school death metal. And man, the list of bands that this band is associated with is impressive as hell. And I'm going to have to read off pretty much all of them. Already covered Cerebral Rot. But also we have Caustic Wound, Demoncy, I'm not entirely sure how to say that one. Bellwitch, Autophagy, Fetid, and Excarnate Entity. You could make an argument here for this band being a supergroup. And again, I still think it's really interesting that, most of these bands are kind of located in the Pacific Northwest, and this band is from Austin. Anyway, for those of you that missed Cerebral Rot, only got a chance to see them once, they were absolutely incredible at MDF. Good news, this band sounds almost just like him. Like, with all the bands that these guys are members of, I would say Cerebral Rot and probably Fetid are the closest ones in terms of this band's sound. This is absolutely just rotten and just gross sounding death metal. Like, this album does not give a shit about melody. It wants to just beat you over the head with riffs that feel like they're like caked in viscera and blood and probably fragments of bone. Actually, the album cover might be an actual illustration of what the riffs sound like on here. Now, it does kick off with an intro, and honestly, I'm not going to complain about it because it's a pretty solid setup. Purging Creation. You get horror synths, you get this kind of like droning tremolo and drum accents that are kind of like pushed in the back, and then you get this just kind of terrifying, ugly spoken word with a weird like vocal distortion, like a pitch correction on it. I couldn't pick up every word, but there was a lot of stuff about guts and carnage and probably dismembering a corpse or someone that's about to become a corpse. It's a good setup for the atmosphere, and then it goes right into spinous forms of mortal abhorrence. And right away, you're just getting beaten over the head with like heavy, thick tremolos, blast beats, but like you get a lot of blast beat variety. Like you get like the faster ones, you get that more stomping Mike Smith one, like where you're just kind of hitting everything all at once. Lots of twisting, churning riffs and crawling melodies. Melodies is kind of used loosely here. Like a lot of these are very squawky, like kind of like the little pinch harmonics you hear all throughout most of Incantation's discography. Short dive bomb solos, and then there are the vocals. I thought the vocal modulation was going to end with the intro. Nope, it is throughout the entire album. This guy has a very deep, gnarly growl, but they add a little bit of like pitch correction and some additional effects there to make it sound absolutely inhuman. They're low, they sound very wet, like they have this damp sound to them, like the dude's like gargling soup or being more than likely vomit. There's lots of like random retches and pukes in there. They kind of add like, well, a lot of atmosphere. Honestly, a lot of the additional grossness of this band's sound is supplied by the vocal delivery on here. That isn't to say the rest of the music isn't putrid. This is just flat out gross from start to finish. There isn't a riff on here that doesn't like evoke a stank face. Like everything just kind of just made my face do what it's doing right now. I worked hard to fix my face after listening to this 2 times. and it's starting to come back already. And that's just me thinking of the riffs. And I'm also jamming Cerebral Rot in the background. That's probably contributing to it too. Now I gotta talk about the production here, because I think the production is absolutely perfect for what they're going for. This was produced and mixed by Billy Anderson, who I'm not familiar with, but apparently he's worked with a lot of my favorite bands. Neurosis, Sleep, Unsane, Mr. Bungle. And then this was mastered by Dan Lowndes of Cruciamentum, who does an amazing job in production overall. And this just has this thick, murky sound. I love this guitar tone. Again, very similar to Cerebral Rot. It has that thick, kind of like muddy sound to it, but it's still very distinct. And again, you're not looking for something that is playing distinct technical riffs. A lot of this is just like blunt force, nasty riffs, heavy, deep tremolos, very dissonant harmonies. You don't really need to hear every single note super clearly, but for the most part you can, and it retains this muddy, swampy sound. The bass note on here, dude, it sounds like someone boiling, like, I don't know, motor oil in the background, and it's just sort of like sizzling and percolating. It is an absolutely filthy sound. And the drums sound super organic, natural as hell, and I love the drum performance on here. This guy does kind of just everything, like a lot of variety in terms of rhythms, really cool turnovers. It keeps these songs flowing, which these songs are all pretty long. This is only 7 tracks, and outside of the intro, the shortest track on here is just a hair over 6 minutes. You have 1 over 7, there's 1 over 8 minutes, and the last track on here, Secreted Effluence Spilling, that one is over 12 minutes. But they do manage to keep it interesting for these longer songs. There maybe are a couple of points where I do feel like it kind of drags, because when it comes down to like the riff work on here, all of it is very, very primal. Like, this is like zombie caveman ooga booga death metal. When they're not droning on tremolos and squawking it up with like dive bombs and just nasty grooves, they are beating you over the head with just like primal chuggy riffs. There's like a little bit of like early brutal death metal, or at least stuff that is kind of adjacent to brutal death metal. You get these like sharp kind of like chromatic riffs, and like this, again, like Mike Smith style blast beat that kicks it off before it gets into this swampy, muddy, like just riffy groove that it kind of settles in. And there are other moments on this album where they kind of just, you know, get a little bit more brutal, like a little bit more outside of like, you know, kind of the Autopsy, you know, Morbid Angel-esque sort of sound on here. There's a section on Gorging Gastric Decedent, which I had to look up decedent because I don't think I've ever seen that word before. It's just a fancy word for corpse. But there's a section of blast beats with this like cool, like descending and ascending pinch harmonic little accent on it. It kind of, you know, makes that section stand out a little bit. There's also one on the last track, Secreted Effluence Spilling, where you get these hefty single chugs and this faster blast beat pattern, and then it settles into this awesome breakdown groove. One of my favorite riffs and moments on this album. They get into like a breakdown pattern, but they keep that open chord chug kind of in the same rhythm, and then they add this crawling lead melody on top, which, again, every time I say melody in here, I feel like it's slightly misleading, because there's nothing on here that I would say is just very tuneful and very pleasant to the ear, unless you like the most swampy and most wretched of death metal. The most melodic moments on here, I would just say, are just like more powerful, kind of like catchy, old school death metal riffs. Again, the title track or eponymous track, whatever. After you get past the blast beats, you get settled into this like really cool double time groove. I mean, it has a lot of bolt thrower energy to it, but the fact that it's so gross and swampy and damp sounding, it's more like barf thrower. It's clear the main focus with this album is definitely riffs, and just throwing as many riffs into a song as possible, but to their credit, stitching them together really well. Lead work on here is, again, very similar to Cerebral Rot. A lot of dive bombs, a lot of like squawky atonal stuff. They're just intended to sound nasty and fit the atmosphere of the album. You do get some more like lavish long ones, but for the most part, they're very short, and then they're generally broken up by either a cool riff pattern, or this band likes to pause and just let the singer barf something into the microphone and then go right back to it. Now, I do have to say that I do favor probably the back half of this album a little bit more than the front half. The front half is all about like the establishing shot of just them beating you over the head with riffs. Towards the back half of the album, it gets a little bit more nuanced. I would definitely say like there's a lot of like Finnish death metal influence on here, And that is just the, kind of like froggy vocals that are a little close to Demolish. But the last three songs, Gorging, Gastric Descendant, Ripened Psychosis, and Secreted Effluence Spilling, they all have Death Doom moments. And Death Doom, that's kind of a thing that I think like the Finnish death metal scene kind of like perfected in terms of like really injecting it in their overall style of death metal. You get more of those like doomy, sinister riffs, like they're not just about being gross and squawky, they're a little bit more melodic, but they're just oppressive and dark and sinister. Ripened Psychosis does that incredibly well. There's a really awesome slowdown at the end that I think is just absolutely killer. And how it opens I thought was really cool because you get this droning, monotonous riff, but on top of it, you get this harmony that throws a little like tremolo tag on it. It's just kind of catchy and interesting. But overall, that was the first one that I really noticed that it kind of stayed a little bit slower and more monotonous up until you get to the last track, Secreted Effluence Spilling. One of the few ones that really makes use of like some cleaner passages too. Like there's only a couple. Just hearing those like haunting clean melodies, it gives the song like a chance to get like a little bit of setup. And then it's off to the races after that. Just cool riff change after cool riff change. The song is an absolute monster. It's pretty much everything that this band does on the album in one song. It's one of those songs. But there is one surprise. At the end is quite possibly the nastiest part on this entire album, where it slows down to almost a funeral doom crawl, droning riffs. It sounds absolutely putrid. If you played this part of the song in your kitchen, you would have to throw out all the food in your fucking refrigerator because it would all spoil. It's that fucking filthy. It's a slow motion apocalypse of an end that drones out into like just this feedback riddled, noisy, just horrifying end. It's pretty much the perfect way to close this album, though I will say the feedback got to be a little bit much. And that might have been my only like true blue negative on here. Like I do have some criticisms. I do think that some of the songs in the front half, they don't stand apart from one another because every one of these songs being long and every one of these songs just being an absolute riff farm, they kind of repeat a lot of stuff. It's very primal riffing overall, and they're doing a lot of the same things, but they're doing it really well. And honestly, there was only like maybe like 1 point, I think maybe Essence of Disillusion, where I kind of lost steam for a little bit, but it picked it up almost immediately with another killer riff change. So, I mean, overall, this album kind of does everything I would want a Cerebral Rot album to do, or a Fetid album to do if they get around to making another Fetid album. So overall, I'm going to give this 4 stars. This is awesome. And I also have to say that this band is off to a better start than Cerebral Rot. I didn't necessarily like their debut, but their second album, absolutely amazing. This feels like the sequel to that album. Everything about this is just fucking gross. Like, I'm sure there's some other adjectives I haven't used yet. Rancid. I'm pretty sure I used putrid already. Spoiled. That kind of works. I mean, honestly, the album kind of has like the audio texture of spoiled milk. But again, that's a good thing. This is intended to be filthy, disgusting, rotten. I mean, it's very much in the vein of like Autopsy, and again, like a lot of like really just wretched sounding Finnish death metal. I dig pretty much everything on here. The riff work, I think it's solid. Again, very primal, very gross. It doesn't try to flirt with melody that much. It just goes for the jugular and watches the blood spill out. The production here is absolutely amazing for what this band was going for. Everything sounds rich and full, and again, like oddly damp. It's that level of swampiness that I kind of like in this style of death metal. If you were a big fan of Cerebral Rot and you wanted another Cerebral Rot album, this is pretty much the next best thing. Outside of that, if you love Incantation, Witch Vomit, Autopsy, a little bit of Bull Thrower, God, I mean, pretty much all the bands that this band is involved in, throw those on the list too. Trust me, just check this out. This thing is an absolute monster. So if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We also have memberships. They are only 99 cents, and our lone perk is doing a members only live stream, which we'll probably do one towards the end of April. And in general, I mean, we kind of just shoot the shit on there, but we also, might do some themed ones. Who knows? Anyway, memberships are the main way to support the channel now. We also still have our store, thrallsmetal.com, with our hats and shirts. That is linked down below in the video description. And there's also a join button down here someplace for you to Barf and Wretched. I don't know, I try to theme this to the album, but I don't recommend doing that because you'll ruin your phone, computer, laptop, whatever you're using. And of course, thank you guys so much for, again, all your supports. It's amazing doing this. Tons more content coming up. We're going to work on some discussion videos. I'm still working on like some States of Metal stuff and, you know, just a lot of different segments because we want to keep you overloaded with content because that's what we fucking do here. Anyway, one more thank you because you guys are awesome and we will catch you later.